Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer, folks. Have you ever just stared blankly at a language app, totally overwhelmed, kind of wondering if you even have what it takes to actually become fluent? Well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we are completely demystifying this solo language learning process. We're going to break down exactly how to escape that endless cycle of false starts and wasted effort and replace it with a highly structured, completely independent path to actual real-world fluency.
To get us there, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The language learning trap. 2. Picking the right language. 3. The 3-step solo method. And 4. Surviving the real world.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the language learning trap.
We really gotta address this chaotic and honestly pretty flawed way most of us try to learn online right now. You know the fantasy, right? You pick a super hard language, effortlessly impress some strangers, maybe rack up a ton of views, and instantly become the most fascinating person in the room. But the reality? Yeah, reality hits a bit differently. Most people pick a language they honestly have no business learning. They knock out exactly one lesson, forget about it completely, and then fall right into the trap of watching some How I Became Fluent in 6 Weeks video. And the kicker? That video was usually made by someone who actually took 6 years to learn the language themselves. You end up consuming content about learning instead of actually doing the work. The biggest takeaway here is this: you absolutely cannot treat language learning like a chore, or you are guaranteed to fail.
Moving right along to Section 2, picking the right language. Look, if you're a total beginner, picking an accessible language, think Spanish, French, or Portuguese, is going to give you some early momentum and keep things fun. But even if you go for something a bit harder, the real deciding factor is your motivation. Let's look at bad versus good motivations here. Wanting to understand anime? Yeah, that's a bad motivation. That is not going to keep you going for more than a day. Taking a required language class for school? Also bad. We all know your finger is going to slip and you'll just paste your entire homework assignment into DeepL anyway. Now, a good motivation? How about my friends speak Spanish and they made a secret group chat without me? That is an excellent, highly practical reason to learn. And the ultimate motivation? The British invaded my country and I need English to survive. Okay, it sounds extreme, but historically speaking, survival is a wildly successful motivator. You need a reason that actually impacts your day-to-day life. Okay, Section 3, the 3-step solo method.
Forget everything you've heard about needing to hire some expensive tutor or finding a language partner who has to talk to you like a toddler. This is a proven, highly structured framework to become fluent entirely on your own, right from your living room. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact sequence you need to follow. It's just 3 straightforward steps. Step 1, grab a beginner textbook to grasp the basics. Step 2, jump on YouTube with context for listening comprehension. And Step 3, record yourself for speaking practice. Let's break these down.
For Step 1, getting those basics down, you don't need 100 different apps. All you need is to find a free beginner textbook PDF online or, just check one out from the local library and actually work through the exercises. So the absolute crucial number to remember here is 12. It might take you 1 solid month to finish that beginner book, but the progress you make, it'll be equal to about 2 full years of just tapping around on Duolingo, or roughly 12 years of standard language classes in an American school. It is literally the most efficient way to build your foundation.
Once you've got that foundation built, you move right to Step 2, listening. Notice you aren't even trying to speak yet. You just need to know what the language is actually supposed to sound like. So the goal is to watch YouTube videos in your target language. But your magic number here is 30%. You need to pick videos where you can understand at least 30% of what's happening just through context clues. If it sounds like total gibberish, hey, it isn't your fault. Native speakers talk incredibly fast. Don't let them gatekeep the language from you. You can easily bypass this by simply slapping the word easy onto your YouTube search. Think easy Spanish or easy French. That'll pull up content paced perfectly for your current level.
Now, I need you to pay very, very close attention to this next rule, because it will make or break your progress. Whatever you do, do not turn on English subtitles. I know, it's so tempting. But if you rely on English subtitles while watching foreign content, your brain is just reading English. You might trick yourself into thinking you're absorbing the language, but in 5 years, the only thing you're going to have to show for all those hours is an anime profile picture and a Discord Nitro subscription. You have got to use subtitles in your target language. So let's see how this builds into the final phase. By using those automatic captions in your target language and actually looking up the words you don't know, you're going to gradually improve. And hitting 70% comprehension in those subtitles, that is your exact trigger. Boom. When you understand 70% of what you're watching, it is time to unleash Step 3, speaking practice. Which brings us right to your solo speaking tactics. How exactly do you practice speaking without a partner? First, you pause those YouTube videos right after a juicy sentence and repeat it out loud, or at least whisper it to yourself. Just pretend you're in a real conversation. Second, when you hear a really useful phrase, jot it down in a notebook to get some writing practice in. Third, and I cannot stress this enough, this is the most important part, sit down and record yourself talking to a camera. Just talk to the lens about your day, what you did, what you're excited about. And finally, if you forget a word mid-sentence, don't panic. Just fill that memory gap with English, keep the flow going, and when you watch the recording back later, look up those missing words using tools like DeepL or reversal context. If you stick to this, you will become fluent without ever needing a tutor.
And finally, Section 4, Surviving the Real World. Because let's be totally honest here, linguistic fluency is entirely meaningless if you step off a plane and have zero clue about the culture or the current politics of where you're visiting. Picture this. You go to France. Your tourist expectation is probably romance, croissants, some standard sightseeing, but the reality, you might walk out of your hotel right into hundreds of French farmers driving their tractors directly into the capital to form a massive blockade. Now, if you just memorized a textbook, you'd be terrified. But if you stop a local on the street, they'll just shrug and tell you it's a normal Tuesday. Creative protest is simply a standard way to pass the time in France. You have to know what is actually happening in the real world.
So to avoid looking completely confused abroad, you've got to keep up with international politics. The source material highlights using media aggregation tools to do this really efficiently. Specifically, it brings up Ground News, which is an app and website designed to feed you news from multiple sources while explicitly showing you the political bias and the factuality of those sources. It's basically a cheat code to quickly map out the cultural landscape before you even pack your bags. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it breaks down the exact same event. Let's take that French farmer protest as a prime example of how media bias works internationally. A center-leaning article might simply state, farmers are protesting the government. But a left-leaning source, they might frame those exact same protesters as strong, revolutionary heroes standing up to power. Meanwhile, a right-leaning source might frame them as angry, manure-slinging traffic blockers causing absolute chaos. As a language learner, seeing all these angles impartially is how you actually understand the deep nuances of the culture you're studying.
And that brings us to the sheer scale of information you need to navigate. 306. For a single major story, like an agricultural protest, there could literally be 306 different sources covering it worldwide. Understanding that full coverage and seeing the biased distribution across all those different outlets is absolutely crucial for achieving true cultural fluency. You aren't just learning words anymore, you are learning how a society talks to itself.
Which leaves us with this massive, vital question to close out our explainer today. Are you just memorizing a vocabulary list in your bedroom? Or are you actually preparing to navigate the reality of a complex, vibrant, and sometimes totally chaotic new culture? Language is a tool, right? It's for survival and connection. Follow the Solo method, stay culturally informed, and the real world will be entirely yours to explore. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.